Hey, Kingdom Millionaires, welcome back to Spiritual DNA. In the previous episode, we started with learning about Genesis 1, verse 26. The first half where it says, God said, let us make man in our image. We learned that his image is spirit. He is holy, wise, just, good, and perfect. And just as him, he created us to be holy in our hearts, wise in our minds, and just in our actions. We are perfected and made good through the blood of Christ because of the fall of man. In this episode, we are going to dissect the second half of this verse, which says, and after our likeness. And so likeness means his attributes or his very nature. What makes him up, right? His very nature. And in chapter 1, he gives us awesome insight into his nature and his attributes. And this is not a full list, but this is just from what we see in chapter 1, that God is an abundant God. Out of his fullness, he created and produced what he saw from his vision. And so he had this vision to have a kingdom with citizens or children, such as ourselves, that bear his image and that bear his nature, the very essence of who he is. And so he went on to first create the atmosphere and the habitat for these children to live in. And so we also see that in everything he created and produced, he made it to be fruitful and to bear forth after its like kind. And he also multiplied it. And so when we're thinking about our finances, when we're thinking about life overall, this is what we're called to do as image bearers of God and Christ. We are called out of our abundance and our fullness thereof to create and produce the very vision that God has for our lives. And he has a vision for each and every one of our lives. He always shows us this vision from end to beginning. And so he shows us the end of this vision. So just like Abraham, you're going to be a father of many nations. But then Abraham had to start from where he was. Out of where Abraham was, he was called to go forth and produce, to use his authority, to use his rulership, to produce and create things, to be fruitful and to multiply. And so it's the same with us. God is calling us out of the vision that he has for us. And if we're just speaking about wealth, for instance, money and wealth, there is a vision that he has for us relating to this. It's all throughout the word, to prosper us, for us to be abundant, for us to be in plenty, all of these things, right? And so even if he didn't specifically come to you and give you a number, for instance, he did that with me, you can still use the vision in the word to produce or bring forth what God has for your life. And from that place, you can begin to start your journey. So with that being said, you are called to use your authority to bring forth and to produce and to create things along your journey, along your process, or within your process to becoming whatever the vision is that God has for you. Also, one who is a ruler, one who is decreeing things, right? So if we look on the right side, this is all who are non-image bearers. And this is how we show up a lot of the times when it comes to talking to God, when it comes to our daily life, the way we live, when it comes to the way we present ourselves in front of others. We show up from a scarce place. We look all around us, we see, and we say, okay, well, I don't have this, and I don't have that, and I'm not this, and I'm not that, etc. So we show up from our limitations. We show up from this scarce place, not from our fullness in Christ. And then we try to live life, but we're unclear. Where are we supposed to go? What are we supposed to be doing? If I ask anyone, what kind of vision do you have for your finances? Most people would say, I don't have one. So how do you know where you're going as it relates to your money and your finances? right? And that's one clear indication of why we're not able to produce, because we don't know what are we producing from, right? We're producing from what we see every day. And a lot of times the picture that we see is scarcity. We see that our total income is coming up short, right? We see that we're in debt. We see that we're not enough. That's what we see, and that's what we begin to think. So then we go on and we become beggars. We become victims. We remain in this oppressed state. We become manipulators. We show up in prayer as beggars and victims, right? God, please, God, please just help me. Or sometimes we, if someone calls and say, oh, how are you doing? Oh, just barely getting by, girl, just barely getting by, right? We show up with these images that are not duplicates or replicas or resemblance of who God is and who Christ is. So already we're starting in the negative, and we're trying to be fruitful, and we're trying to produce something out of this place, but it can't produce anything. What it's going to produce is like kind. This is the principle of the earth, is going to produce like kind. So if you're showing up from this place of scarcity and limitations, you're going to continue to produce scarcity and limitations. You're going to continue to be non-fruitful. And then we look around and we're like, okay, well, God must not want me to have it, or that's not the will of God, or, that's not who Christ was. And all of these things that the culture of the church begins to talk about and say, which is not accurate. Because literally in the first chapter, God shows us who he is. And then he says, I am not only showing you who I am, but I'm also showing you what to do. And then I'm going to create you, and I'm going to create you out of my image. I'm going to create you to have my nature, to have my attributes, so that you're able to do exactly what I just did on the earth. As one who is a ruler on the earth, we are called to do exactly what he did, exactly what Christ did. Christ showed up and did the same exact thing. We're called to do the same exact thing, first in our lives, then in the earth. If we can't master where we are, how can we go forth and master other things within the earth, as we're called to do? So I ask you this question: what image are you making financial decisions from? How do you perceive yourself? What image are you making financial decisions from, and how do you perceive yourself? You have to get extremely clear on this, because if you continue to show up as one who is scarce and limited, you're going to continue to create the same non-fruitful results, and you're going to continue to show up as this beggar and this victim who always needs assistance, when you don't need assistance at all, because you have everything you need within you to create and to produce and to bring forth the vision and the plans that God has for your life. And within that, there is prosperity, there is bread, there is food for you, there is supply, there is supplication. And it's not just a little bit, it's abundant. Because not only does God want you to be taken care of, but he wants you to be able to take care of others in the earth. And so I challenge you to really think about this. Really think about how you're perceiving yourself, and really think about the image that you're operating from when it comes to your finances and the type of decisions that you're making. If you need help with this work, definitely click the link in the description so that I can get you into the academy, so we can begin to dissect your thoughts and begin to do this work. Be blessed.